everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. And today, we're going to be a fly on the wall of the future. You know, I'm really kind of trying to stay away from doing a lot of predictive podcasts just because, as I've said in the past, well, it doesn't really do much good. You know, because then you throw a prediction out and it comes true. And the goal is to get them not to come true because we want to make enough changes for some of these particular predictions so that they're not our imminent future, because they're not real super happy predictions, right? So we don't really want them as our imminent future. So my goal today is not to freak everybody out, yet to read some headlines that I'm reading in the ethers, in the celestial news, in the future, in 2024. Because I believe we can make a difference now. We've got, 3 years until 2024. So we can make a difference now to totally run this timeline right off the rails. And so let's just get started here. And I apologize for sounding a little stuffed up here. My allergies up here in Montana this summer have been off the hook. And we've had air conditioning running constantly because it has been over 100 degrees for so many days in Montana that I can't even tell you how many records we've broken. I mean, it's just ridiculous. This time of year, usually we have, it's usually 80s or low 90s, and we've been breaking 100. I mean, it's just been relentless, this heat. And today we're over 100, again, by a long shot, like 110. So we have the air conditioning blowing, which of course dries your nose out. And then at night, you're sleeping with every window in the house open and every fan open. So you're blowing every bit of pollen up your nose while you sleep. Come on, my high West and Midwest friends out there, you know how this goes. So you wake up in the morning feeling like you're breathing through a cheesecloth made of like dandelions. Anyway. So today we are reading a headline from 2024, and it is "The Water Wars Are Upon Us." The water wars. I want to talk about the water wars of 2024, and I wasn't going to talk about this because it's kind of freaky, but the bottom line is, gang, if we don't know what's coming, we can't fix it, right? So we can all sit here and cry in our beer and say, oh, I don't want to know, this sucks, meh. Or we could have an opportunity to take a look and say, wow, we really could do something about this. I choose to be proactive instead of a bean and ammo hoarding reactive person. Yay, proactive. So, in this news article, it's a newspaper article in the New York Times, actually, that I'm reading about here in the future. And it's about the water wars are upon us. And it's all about what's happening with our decline in the water table. Now, it is 2021 currently, in case you listen to this podcast in archive at another time. And right now, it's the summer of 2021. We're starting to see insane forest fires, and they started back in June. These forest fires were kicking off in June. In fact, one of the forest fires that popped up and raged along ate all of our property. My wife and I have property out in the back of the Beartooth Mountains, 20 acres out there, just recreational property to camp on and whatnot. And that fire came through and not only burned our entire property, just everything singed black right to the bottom, but it also singed every single bit of terrain that is our view around there. It ate the side of the mountain. It ate all the timber off the mountains that we look at. If you look way down the way, you can see a little green maybe on the end of the Beartooths on that edge of the mountain range there. And luckily, we did not build any structures on our land. We hadn't built anything yet. I mean, we had built a little woodshed, basically. We kind of hauled one out there and stuck it out there. But really, I mean, we lost sagebrush and cactus and some really pretty indigenous grass, which apparently is supposed to grow back next year with the vengeance. It's supposed to come back and it's beautiful and all these things. Right now, it's just a black, gross mess. And that was the beginning of the fire season. And so, I mean, here we are, and it's still burning, and there's more fires burning, and everything's coming up. And I mean, there's so many fires in this state. It's crazy. So why am I talking about this during water wars? Well, one of the reasons everything's on fire in Montana and in California and in Oregon and in Idaho is because there's no rain out here. I mean, the western half of the United States is just in this heinous drought. And generally speaking, the Rocky Mountain Corridor has more rain than other places in the country. I mean, we can have dry summers. Those can be a bit cyclical, quite honestly. Yet the fact that we have such dry weather, I mean, listen to my voice, you guys. Listen to me. Homer, Bart, go get your sister, Bart. I sound like Marge Simpson over here. Homer. And it's because there is no water coming out of the sky in Montana right now. So, we're talking about the water wars of 2024. Well, I'm getting there. Here in Billings, in my lovely city, my hometown, there is this magnanimous, massive river on our southern border. And this massive river is called the mighty Yellowstone. And it is quite literally the last major undammed river in America is the Yellowstone River. And they better not dam that thing up. Damn it. But I'm here till Tuesday, eat the buffet. They better not, because the headwaters are, of course, Yellowstone Park. And I'm sure you've seen those iconic pictures of Yellowstone Falls, the big falls that comes into Yellowstone Canyon. And that river basically falls 5,000 feet from the point in Yellowstone Park to the point where it joins the Missouri. So, and then the Missouri joins the Mississippi. So it all, everything's flowing out. Well, that's a lot of water. Okay, and it's being fed by several glacial springs, mountain springs, all the way down, not just coming out of Yellowstone Park, but by the time it gets clear out to Billings down here in south central Montana, you've got a lot of other creeks coming through different parts of the Beartooths, and you've got runoffs from the Bighorns. You've got all kinds of runoff coming into this river, which makes it very deep and very powerful, which it is. You don't want to swim here. In the Yellowstone, you will drown. It's got 3 different currents in it. It's a nasty river, but it's a wild river, okay? So here's Billings, Montana, and our water source is the Yellowstone River, which, again, you can imagine how much water is going into it, okay? Now, we've just been issued a water conservation notice for the city of Billings. And nobody's supposed to be sprinkling their lawns or doing anything, using any kind of water on Mondays. Now, it's not the first time that Billings has asked people to, watch the water conservation or whatever. But the fact that they're having everybody do it every Monday, that's unusual for this part of the country. And that tells me that the Yellowstone River is pretty low for this time of year. And it is. All the rivers are really low. It's weird. As a matter of fact, the Yellowstone is so low that it's causing the water to get hot or much warmer. And of course, the Yellowstone, the Madison, all of these storied rivers up here in Montana, a river runs through it, right? This is where you go fly fishing for those magical, unreal brown trout and cutthroat trout and rainbow trout. And it literally looks like a movie, the kind of trout you pull out of these rivers on a fly. Except the trout are all dying. And I have never seen anything like that. I am 52 years old. I am a born and bred Montanan. And granted, I've lived out of state different times in my life, for sure. Went to college, went to LA, did all these things, went to Seattle. But I don't ever remember anybody in my family saying, hey, guess what? The Yellowstone River is getting so low and so hot that all the trout are dying. That's that's a little heavy, okay? And on top of that, of course, we've got the city of Billings, which if you factor in the surrounding areas, the new census brought in about 164,000 people in Billings and surrounding areas. Doesn't sound like much if you live in the valley in California, but for Montana, that's like a huge amount of people living in one place. So we're talking about the water wars of 2024. How do we get there? Well, if we're considering it's 2021 right now, and the Yellowstone River, which is this mighty, vast, giant, huge, iconic, undammed, powerful juggernaut, gargling and cutting its way down the Rocky Mountains and out into the plains and smashing into the Missouri, all right? And it's low. I mean, do you know how many mountain ranges and mountain creeks and underground springs are feeding the Yellowstone? And it's low. By the time, we're really only halfway in the whole stretch of it going all the way out there to the Missouri. And the bottom line, I mean, from Yellowstone Park, really. The bottom line with that is there's a lot of irrigation that comes out of the Yellowstone. Of course, Montana is a very, very agriculturally driven state. Agriculture and tourism are our two industries here. You can get good beer in Montana because we grow wheat. So, but it really, I mean, it's crazy. And of course, the farmers, if you are a dryland farmer, your crop is just toast. Dryland farming, by the way, means that you are relying on the elements to just rain your crop. And you've got crops that can handle drier altitudes, and those are usually types of grasses, types of wheats and hays and things like that can handle drier terrain. But the dryland farmers are like, oh God, this is dreadful. This is terrible. So the water wars of 2024, how do we get there? Well, if you can imagine that Americans who really do hate to be inconvenienced, let's just talk about every single silly mask argument. And I'm sorry, I do think they're silly. And I deeply apologize if I'm offending anybody out there. Yet my view on this is it's silly not to put a mask on your face. It isn't going to kill you, with the exception of maybe one or two people actually medically. And people just don't want to do it. It's inconvenient. It wrecks my makeup. It's too hot. I can't breathe. All these things. And sometimes people really can't if you've got COPD or something. Yeah, to me, it is the height of American heathenism to not just do something for the collective and the whole, because for me, I'm inconvenienced. For me, it really doesn't work, because for me, I feel like it's an imposition on my rights. Well, spreading disease isn't your right, but if that's the way you want to play that one out, you knock yourself right into the Constitution with that one. So, here we are, and we're trying to tell the United States to conserve water. Now, the one thing I can say about my state of Montana is because it is an agricultural state, people understand conservation. They do understand rationing water in Montana because you grow crops here. I don't even grow crops, and I get it, And this is what's interesting about Montana, and I really would like to point to Montana as a potential microcosm for what is possible in the United States. Now, I do not mean in our legislature right now. That's a little bit of a poo and poodle show right now. However, in how we collectively do things here in Montana, this is important to note. It doesn't matter if you're a liberal or a conservative here. It doesn't matter if you vote Republican, Democrat, Progressive, Green Party, Libertarian, Tea Party. Don't be late for the party. Just make sure you vote because you're an American. America! So one of the glorious things about Montana is no matter where you sit on the political fence, we're all Montanans. And this is what's funny. We've got a lot of people who've moved into the state recently, and they are not aware of our culture here. So they're coming in from very politically charged places like Portland, and they're coming in from California, and man, they're of the conservative bent, right? So they're coming in here just ready to stand up for the big, for like the very fringy wing right wing, right? And the Montana conservatives are just, sipping on their beer, looking at this person spewing politics in the bar, and the conservative for Montana's drinking their beer and laughing, thinking, well, you'll eventually figure out there ain't enough of us in this whole state to fight with one another, because ain't nobody going to pull you out of a snowdrift then, see, in the winter, if you done piss off all your neighbors, but you just keep a-yelling there, California. So, I mean, really, this is the funniest way this wraps around, but this is literally how it wraps around here. So I wish we could look at Montana as a microcosm for how to get along, because especially in the area of water, we're going to be able to pool together and make sure that we're conserving it, so at least our farmers have something. And the rest of the country, quite frankly, could take a few notes on Montana and how it works together. Now, don't read about it in the news, you guys. People will print the most ridiculous stuff in the news about how it's a Trump state, or it's a blah, or this is, here's a bunch of guys with guns in Montana. Gang, progressives have guns in Montana. Democrats have a lot of guns in Montana. Progressives and Democrats shoot things and eat them in Montana, just so you know, okay? So it's kind of a blendy culture out here. And the reason I bring this up is because when I'm reading this big expose in the New York Times about the water wars of 2024, it goes on to document that there are going to be groups of militias, except they're not going to call themselves militias, because now militia is a bad word since January 6th and the Capitol insurrection. So now, instead of calling themselves a militia, they're going to have a whole different term and a whole different thing. Yet these are guardians. They're calling themselves patriots and water guardians, and they're basically militia groups. And they're going out and they are siphoning water out of rivers, and they're putting them in big trucks, and they are trying to take over diversion areas, like pipelines, for instance. They're trying to break into the pipelines and take the water and let the water out, so that the water that Southern California is pumping in through I guess there's big pipelines and canals that feed Southern California and some of Southern Colorado and places like New Mexico and Arizona. They're getting water in from other places. And apparently these water war groups that are, hey, listen, they're not just, you think right-wing when you think militia. Some of these groups are super, super left-wing too. They are super leftist conservation groups that are poking holes in the pipelines so that the range animals can drink the water because the deer are dying out there. And I mean, it's a whole, so that's why they call it the water wars. So they have National Guard out there that are watching the pipelines to make sure, sheriffs out there to make sure that people aren't getting out to the water. Fascinatingly enough, by 2024, the Colorado River that flows down through the Grand Canyon and goes down south and feeds all that water, it's going to be in a real, real low spot, because we are going to progressively be getting less and less water in between snowpacks. Now, this is going to last from now till about 2026. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing turns around, because we're just heating up. And then the cold that kicks in is insane. And we start getting packed in under snow. And it takes longer for the snow to melt off. And that's the whole thing. But we're not there yet. We're still in the dry portion of our climate crisis, or as we like to call it, global warming, if you're in 1990. So something important to note here is that this is all sounding super hopeless, right? Oh no, there's water wars and militias, and the New York Times is writing about, here's where we are with these water wars. However, gang, we don't have to get there, okay? Because this is really, Southern California ends up on fire, droughted out. They're trying to figure out how to extract seawater and desalinate it, which is an exceptionally expensive thing to do. It looks like, I'm just skimming this article. SpaceX looks like they're going to weigh in a little bit on that with some technology, NASA. So everybody's weighing in globally, because the United States is not the only country having water problems. Yet we have so much land mass out here, and we provide a ton of food for the rest of the world. I don't know if you know that. Yet the United States, especially with wheat and corn, I mean, it takes crap tons of land to grow wheat. Wheat, it's not like a corn stalk where you're going to get several pieces of vegetable off of one corn stalk growing. I mean, one wheat stalk, you're getting the kernels on the top of the wheat stalk, but, that's it. So you got to grow a lot of it. And when we aren't having any water and the farmers can't get any crops, then the price of food skyrockets. And that's one of the reasons why the water wars happen. Because what's happening, as I'm skimming this article, is that, and here's the cliff notes, what's happening is that, in essence, the big cities, the big metropolitan cities, by this time, by 2024, cities like LA and Phoenix and the desert cities are used to rationing water. California is used to rationing water. California, especially in the South, is the westernmost edge of the Mojave. So those city planners understand they're in a desert, right? So, California seems to be handling it pretty well. I mean, people are rationing and all these things. Except what I'm noting here is that as these droughts continue year after year, and we are going to have what's called a compounded drought cycle. It's not that it's not going to rain at all. It just doesn't rain enough. And it's not that it's not going to snow at all. It snows buckets, 1 or 2 big dumps during these periods between now and 2024. It's just that the groundwater between snows really isn't getting all of that. It's not really the aquifers aren't getting that replenished. Plus, people are drilling wells like crazy. They're using the wells to water their lawns. We're draining out aquifers like mad, even here in Billings, Montana. When my grandparents dug a well in their backyard here in Billings, they lived in Midtown, which is smack in the center of the city. And there used to be a great big underground lake that had all kinds of water running in it and water running out of it. And I remember my grandma talking about the well, and it was only about, 13, 14 feet down. Now, what's crazy about that is, they had water the whole time, and they used it. They didn't drink it, but they used it to water their lawn and water their garden and all the things. Well, then I was over my cousin Pete Jeswali's house the other day. Hi, Pete, if you're listening. And we were talking about his yard. And I said, wow, did you poke a well out here? And he says, oh, no, he used to have a well, or somebody had a well there or something. His neighbor did. And the aquifer in question that I told you about that was 13 feet under the ground has since dried up. It's not under the city anymore. So now if you're going to get water, you got to drill all the way down and punch through bedrock, and it's about 20, 30 feet down there. And it's very expensive because it's a very large slab that's over the aquifer. So, people are doing it out here because we're running out of water. So in the water wars of 2024, we have a lot of cities that are needing water, even though they are rationing cities. They're needing potable water, especially in California, in Arizona, in New Mexico, some parts of southern Colorado. I'm looking in this article at the fact that by the time we get to 2024, there have already been water curfews put in effect. People aren't doing lawns. Everything is there's just no water for that, really. I mean, if you're doing lawns, you're breaking the law, you're getting cited. There's still going to be those people that are going to act like the world is just not affecting them. Like the people who are saying, I don't need to wear a mask because it doesn't matter. It's my right. Well, it kind of does matter because you breathe and then you breathe out germs on everybody and it's disgusting. So it does matter. And we still are going to have these people, lots and lots and lots of people, wealthy people, average everyday people who don't want their lawn to die, who says it's their right to rack up a big water bill. It's their right to keep their property values in a good place. It's their right to blah, 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 blah. So we end up having these water problems because there are yahoos out there who are not taking this seriously up to 2024. Are you seeing where I'm going with this podcast, gang? Okay. This is why I'm setting up where we're at in 2021 in Montana, right on the banks of the mighty rolling Yellowstone, where we should have more water as an inland state than you can possibly imagine. Unless you're on the Great Lakes, we should have so much water in Billings, and we are not watering on Mondays now. So this is the beginning of what comes out to be the water wars. And let me tell you a little something. Coca-Cola, Dasani, these distributors have known that we were losing our water and our water tables for years and years. And I'm, of course, now that I'm here at the mic doing the podcast, I'm blanking out which indigenous American tribe, which Native American tribe was screaming and yelling at, I believe it was the Dasani distributor. I hope I'm not misspeaking here. I'm 99% sure it was Dasani, who bought the rights to this massive aquifer and lake that's basically right under their land, their reservation. It's what feeds the people. It's what feeds their outdoors. It's what feeds everything. It would be like if somebody bought the rights to the Columbia River or something. I mean, it was that ridiculous. And they've been pulling all this water and draining out that aquifer. And of course, and I want to say this is down in the Southwest. I don't know if it's the Hopi or the Navajo. It's somewhere down in the Southwest. And of course, you know, the native tribes complained and said, hey, you can't do this, and tried to sue him. Yet for as discounted as our Black Americans are, as discounted as our Latin Americans are, our Native Americans are invisible. I have Native friends who aren't even seen in grocery stores. I mean, it's the weirdest, most disrespectful thing. And this is not the Oppression Olympics. This is not about who's treated more poorly, our Black population or our Native population. Yeah, I'm just bringing to everybody's awareness that, thank God, Black Lives Matter is out there bringing white America's attention to the fact that, hey, some people aren't white and don't have a white life. Isn't that weird? Wow. At the same time, you know, the native lands and the native peoples, man, their land gets just taken away and their water aquifers get drained out and oil wells get drilled. And finally, the XL pipeline, the Keystone pipeline, got shut down, which is helpful because guess what? It was right on the top of the Ogallala aquifer over there, which again, you know, water, kind of important. So why do I say all this? It's because these companies, beverage companies, have known that we were going to be water short for a very long time. So they bought the rights to huge underground aquifers, and that water is not going to be 99 cents in a convenience store. Are you tracking where this is going, see? If you're somebody who invests in the stock market, right now, actually hang on to your stocks. We're going to have a slow stock year. They kind of came up a minute. We're going to have another slow stock year all the way through. We're probably going to have some issues as a variant of COVID starts to poke up, and this Delta variant that's just starting to come out. That's really going to be a problem. However, water wars of 2024, how did we get to a place where our aquifers were drained out in 3 years? How do we get there? We get there because people won't conserve. We get there because I'm gonna be a little pointed, ladies and gentlemen. Yet I don't know about you. I don't know where you cast your ballot. Neither is it my business. That's your American right. Yet all of we Americans drink water. Okay? We all drink water. All of the crops need water. And they don't grow without water. Just watch. I'm sorry, I just thought about this movie called Idiocracy. Have you ever seen it? You have got to oh God, it's right where we're at. Idiocracy is the name of the movie. And they have this Gatorade-like substance in the future in this Idiocracy landscape. called Brando. And the whole entire, I guess, setup for this movie is there's a really boring bummer guy who falls asleep in his basement boring job watching boxes, and he gets transported 1,000 years into the future. And 1,000 years into the future, America is trashed. People are eating food that's so god-awful for them. They're just stupid. They're wearing shirts and clothes with like corporate logos all over them, like a race car driver. It's hysterical. And there is a scene where this I don't want to call the guy, he wasn't a loser. He was just like below average person in terms of motivation. He's in a basement checking boxes in, to a storage unit, whatever. So here he is in Idiocracy, and he wakes up and he's literally the smartest person alive because everybody in the United States in the future, in 1,000 years, has gotten completely stupid, just dummied down to a drooling component. It's actually really super scary, really sad, and you will split a gut laughing because it's just so true. So there's one scene in the movie where, they're talking about what they're going to do, and they've got this World Wrestling Federation guy who became president. I know, it's really, you can't make this crap up. And then there was 2020, there was 2017. Anyway, they're trying to figure out whether crops are dying. And here's this kind of below average dude who's now super smart. Everybody thinks he's a genius. And he says, well, you have to water the crops. And this one gal goes, we do water the crops with Brando because everything loves Brando. And Brando's like Gatorade, and that's their saying. Everybody loves Brando, right? And the guy goes, you don't water crops with Brando, you water it with water. And this whole table looks at him with this dumbfounded look and said, what's in the toilet? I mean, that's where we're headed. So we cannot water our crops with Brando, everybody. And if we all would conserve a bit, then we're not going to get into this water war situation. The problem is, believe it or not, it's interesting because I'm looking at this description. Of course, we still have a ton of gridlock in Congress, red versus blue. All these red state senators here in the future in 2024 are sitting around and blaming California for the water shortage, blaming Phoenix, Arizona for the water shortage. They're blaming these blue places, although Arizona is technically a red state. So the funny part about that is, gang, like I said, California has some of the most strict water rationing laws in the United States because of its population base. It's not California that drains us out, although there are some big conflicts over farmers in Central California in 2024. It's starting actually now, but by the time it gets 2024, it's going to be bad. There are big conflicts between the farmers in Central California who need the water for their crops and restaurants and people who need the water to drink and take a bath in the larger cities. So this is where we have some standoffs, and this is where some of the wars start, and it's over irrigation. Then it, starts into, it's my right to water my lawn if I want to. My rights! Green lawn. And so it's literally like the mask thing all over again, except for these wackos and their lawns, which is super strange. There's going to be a tariff on water. They're going to make it way more expensive if you use over so many gallons or however they're going to be doing this for different cities. So if we just conserve it now, if we just don't drain every drop out of every aquifer now, okay? When you're brushing your teeth, and some of you that might live in drought environments probably know this trick. Some of you who don't live in drought environments may not know this trick. And you may be thinking that your water is going to last forever and ever. Amen. Yet, the Great Lakes right now are flooding, which is really bizarre. They have so much water that's coming into them because of rains that they are eating the coastlines, okay? But the water coming in is not very clean. It's flooding in from all kinds of places that it's just flooding out all over the place. So the Midwest in the next few years is going to have weird floods, heavy floods. And you think, well, great. The Midwest is flooding. That's water. Well, the problem with that water is then it gets into sewage, it gets into chemical pools, and it's full of gunk. And it floods out barnyards and gets fecal matter in it. And it's got rotting carcasses of chickens that are going to happen. I mean, just all this flooding that kills everything and drowns everything. And at that point, you got some really sour, toxic water. It's not like you can just clean it. Now, they are going to make, now I'm talking civil engineers and whatnot are going to make some attempts to clean some of that water up to use it. Yet some of it is just too trashed when you get all this gunk in it. So there are reasons why the Midwest flooding is not a good thing. Plus, it floods and then it stands there and it sits there. So I'm looking at all these rotting corn stalks, and the mosquitoes are unbearable all the way across Iowa and Kansas. I mean, where these crazy deluge of rain just bloats out the rivers and floods everything. And unfortunately, it's draining right out the Gulf. So the water isn't really going to the places that we need it. I mean, of course, some is going to go back to the aquifers. But what we can do is if you've never conserved water before, when you're brushing your teeth, so you go in the morning, you get your little toothbrush out, you smush the toothpaste on, you turn the faucet on. You stick your toothbrush under there, and you're just brushing your teeth the whole time, getting your teeth brushed, and the whole time the water's going shh, and you're doing a really thorough job of getting in there with your teeth, making sure that you're getting every crevice, every little bit and joss and tissel there, getting the whole thing done, and a couple minutes later, your faucet's been running that whole time. And maybe you while this is going on, now you start to rinse your mouth out, but then your spouse comes in. So then you start having a conversation with your spouse all about whatever it is you're talking about. And the water's running. If you would have plugged that sink up, you would have overflown your sink by the time you're done brushing your teeth. So a really handy everyday conservation trick is literally turn the freaking sink off when you're not brushing your teeth. While you're brushing, turn it off. And then when you turn it on, rinse your toothbrush, turn it off. Brush. Now, I remember the first time I did this, I lived in Los Angeles, and it felt so weird, to actually brush my teeth and turn off the faucet. But not only will it save you on your water bill, you will be dead shocked how much water you're barfing out the drain twice a day, just letting that water run like that. However, you will notice not only is your water bill better, but that's going to save a huge amount of water, because if we all did that, remember, we're brushing our teeth with potable water, gang. We're brushing our teeth with treated water. That water has had to go through water treatment. It's gone through hell by the time it actually comes out our spigot. It's not like we're just by a creek and here comes the water. I mean, this is water that's cost money and chemicals and whatever else they're doing to make it clean. So we're going to have water. We're just not going to have very much potable water or savable water. So the water wars of 2024 is what happens because we don't conserve enough and we don't take it seriously enough. And quite frankly, a lot of the folks who aren't taking it all that seriously are the people who, a lot of them are people who've never had to conserve water before. So a lot of folks in the Midwest, a lot of folks in the North, people who are like, what? People up in the Great Lakes, when those lakes are just bloated and they're flooding and it's getting crazy. there's such an imbalance. We have too much water some places that we can't really drink. I mean, I suppose we could drink the Great Lakes water for sure. However, it's pretty pristine, actually. But, I mean, what are we going to do? Drain our Great Lakes? I mean, I don't see that happening. So the issue is mindfulness, gang. And there are ways that you can actually use the water that's in the atmosphere and use it to water your plants. Use it to water your garden. What am I talking about? They make really incredible devices now that are basically a dehumidifier, you guys. And you take one of these things and say you have a humid basement. If you have a house like my wife and I do, and I'm laughing because this house is built in the late 20s, and it's got a classic basement of just like chippy concrete. Kind of looked like a horror show when we first moved in. We put carpet down so it's not so scary. However, this basement has a significant amount of humidity in it. Now, that's great for my guitars down here, but it's not, if you're going to be down there, it's not super great for a lot of other things. And one of the things it is great for is extracting the humidity out of the environment. So they have these machines that you turn on and they literally take water out of the air, and you can get up to 6 gallons of water, depending on how humid it is, into this unit. Now, I suppose you could drink it in an emergency. It probably has some kind of filter thing in it. However, you can take that 6 gallons and you can put it in milk jugs or whatever container you feel is appropriate. And you can use that to water your plants. You can use that to water your garden. Just bank that water up. If you bank up enough of it, you can actually put it in rain barrels. Now, I know that for a lot of cities, they've outlawed capturing water because they don't want freestanding water in the city because they don't want mosquitoes and bugs to come in. However, if you bury your drum, your water drum, and you have a way to get the water in there and a way to get the water out, then it's not an above ground standing water source. It's like a cistern, right? I mean, you could even put a cistern in your backyard if you have that availability. Now, I understand we all don't have a house. If you're living in an apartment, you could still get one of these units, plug it in. If you're on the East Coast where it's heavily humid, you're going to be pulling all kinds of water out of the air that you can then use to, again, water your plants and whatever else. Like I said, some of these machines, and I wish I had a name of some of them off the top of my head. I don't, so Google that. Yet some of these machines, I'm pretty sure you can drink the water out of, which is pretty great. So if we all had something like that, I mean, I kind of paused at that because I thought, God, if everybody in the whole United States of America owned one of those, we'd make the air so dry and dehydrated. What the heck? But I think we'd still have humidity in the air thanks to the ocean that covers the planet. So there's things we can do, gang. If you do have a well opportunity, if you own a home and can drill a well, and you can use that well water to water your grass in your garden, then that gray water, as they call it, it just, that just goes back into the ground and it sinks back down into the water table. It just keeps on going. It's when we take potable water and throw it all over everything that we run out of the water that human beings like to drink or need to drink. And we run out of the water that we need to pump through our hospitals. So wells, these dehumidifier little doohickeys that I'm talking about, making sure that there's even the potty conservation. Now, this is going to gross some of you out, but go with me here. When we go to visit some friends that we have that have a cabin, they have a limited amount of water that they can use that's on the roof of this cabin for things like flushing the toilet or, washing the dishes or any of that. And they have to bring the water up to their cabin because there's no running water up there. So if you visit my friends, then there is a rule. And the rule of if it's yellow in the toilet, okay? If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. So in other words, if if you're sharing a bathroom with multiple people in the house and everybody's going number one, a water conservation technique is just don't flush it every single time you go number one. Now, I know that's a little nasty, people, okay, because we're all peeing on everybody else's pee. And we entitled Americans, we don't like to pee on pee. That is unsanitary. And somewhere Jesus is looking down at us and saying, you did wash that thing when you're done because you just peed on pee. However, there's a lot of water that's flushed down a toilet, and it's potable water. Okay, so another option is if you do have a well, to use the well water to go to the tank of your toilet, because you're not going to drink out of your toilet, not unless you're Cocker Spaniel, okay, or not unless you're really hard up. So you can use the well water, or you can use some of the 6 gallons of water, per se, that you get out of the humidity air fryer thingamy and dump that in the toilet to flush it down. I mean, think about how much water goes down the toilet. The European Union thinks we in America are beyond on crack with our waste of water over here. They have toilets over there that are incineration toilets. They have toilets over there that have these little jet squirts of water rather than just this big tank waiting to dump into everything. I mean, our plumbing in America, we're still acting like it's 1750 and we have all these natural resources to rape and harvest off the land. We literally are still acting like that over here, even though our population is gamillion tripled, okay? So in other words, if you've ever had to flush a toilet manually, and some of us who live in more outback areas or have smaller cabins or whatnot, have had to flush a toilet manually. And that means that you've got a jug of water and you've used the restroom. And when you're done, you are just pouring that jug right into the toilet, and it forces the water down and the toilet flushes itself. So you could you could turn off the toilet from the main potable water plumbing. You could turn the potty off from the potable water and then take this extra water that you might have accrued out of the atmosphere and pour it in the back of your toilet, in the reservoir back there. And you can flush with that. So, I mean, there's a lot of little tricks that we could use if we're just willing to be slightly inconvenienced a little bit. And I know it's kind of yucky to leave freestanding pee just sitting in toilet water. Just put the lid down, gang. Nobody needs to look at it. And then when it gets too obnoxious with toilet paper, you're eventually going to have to flush that down. Remember, if it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. There you go. I mean, these are just a few little bitty ideas, and these are things we use every single day. And for instance, I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm an obsessive dish rinser. I rinse dishes all the time before I stick them in the dishwasher. Another great water conservation tip is if you have a double-sided sink, you can fill up one side of the sink and just put some detergent in it and just let it sit there during the day. It doesn't even have to be all the way filled up. It can just be, moderately filled up. And just throw your dishes in there so you're not, running new water every single time you have a dish going through there. Now, obviously, if you live by yourself, maybe that's not necessary. I have a teenager, so I rinse my dishes. These are just little bitty things that we as Americans take for granted, is toilet water and the water just running as we brush our teeth. And there'll just be water in the sink, when we want to rinse something. Also, don't be afraid to let your lawns get a little brown between now and 2024. In fact, I would really encourage some alternate landscaping with plants that don't require a ton of water like that. I mean, have a little patch of grass that's like your special little spot where you can put your lawn chair and sit on the grass and play with the kids. But the acres and acres of grass, gang, take so much water. And unless it's coming down out of the sky, forget about it. In our house here in Montana, we have an underground sprinkler system. And I had to turn this sprinkler system way back because even though it was going off 4 times a week, it was on 7 times. I put it back down to 4. Now I've got it down to 3. It was so hot here that even though it was going a lot and watering the grass was still brown because it was just getting baked with 100-degree day after 100-degree day. It was terrible. So alternative landscaping is great. There are some real, and I'm not saying ruin your yard, your baby yard that you've worked your whole life on. I'm just saying, let's plant some things that don't require so much water. There are native grasses that are actually green and they stay green, but they barely require any water. They're just different types of plume grasses. And you can have little snips of, grass around as an accent, but different pine trees, different junipers, they don't require a whole lot of water. So these are just little tiny, the tip of the iceberg adjustments. If you really want to get into water conservation, it'll kind of make you panic. It's like, oh my God, I can't use water for this and I can't use water for that. And I have to recycle my water in my shower and I have to this and that. And it just gets crazy. But when we are looking at water wars of 2024, the water wars of 2024, gang, this is so intense that we have people stealing, shooting each other for cases of water. People hijacking water trucks. Water trucks are needing armed escorts. It's like a freaking Mad Max movie, and that's in 3 years. So if we can make enough changes right now, we don't have to see this future come to pass. I really need your help on this. I don't want to have a world where weird right and left militias are fighting and the lefties are poking holes in pipelines to water the deer and the farmers are shooting them because they need that for their crops. And I mean, it is unreal what we're going to be seeing. And the water wars really rage from 2024 to 2026 before the snow patterns change up. And we start getting a little more snow and the snowpack is bigger and it just, we have other problems because we have fires that burnt everything and then we've got no water, excessive heat, biblical epic floods with gross flies and nasty dead floating farm animals. And I mean, this is why I don't do predictions anymore. Okay, so we have an opportunity to switch this around, at least in the United States. So I really hope that what you get out of this podcast today is not a bunch of doom and gloom and freaky deaky stuff. Yet we don't have to tap all our resources out and then just be screwed in 2024 or right now. We don't have to do that. We can start conserving now so that if we conserve a little bit now, then I can see the alternative timelines for that. And even though we are having compound drought and compound drought, we're not having compound drought with excessive use of all of this water and these resources. And by the way, some of the biggest users of resources and water is corporate America, who just burns through all this stuff. I mean, when you go to work, it would be nice if you mentioned something to your workplace about them doing some water conservation. Think about how many millions of gallons of potable water go through Manhattan in one day. I mean, now granted, Manhattan's an island, so there you go. Yet, or St. Louis, we're going to have a bloating Mississippi River here come a few years. Poor St. Louis is going to get all flooded out. So we've got things we can do to have clean, good water. And let's all just make a decision now that the future matters. We have the availability to change this future. If we didn't, If we could not enact any change whatsoever, there is no way in heck that I would be doing this podcast. Seriously, why would I tell everybody all this if we couldn't change it? That is super pointless. That's like telling somebody, oh, guess what? There's a great big giant asteroid headed straight for Earth. It's about going to crack us into 19 pieces. Go have a bud. You know what I mean? What is the point of that? So we can change this, gang. Please talk to your family. Please talk to your friends. Please talk to your children. Talk to your social groups. Make it a thing. Make it a thing about this is what we have to do to conserve this water, because if we don't conserve this water, then we're going to be in a place where we can't get water. Let me tell you, go one day, if you don't have a health issue that this would compromise, okay? Get up in the morning, and if you're not going to work that day, brush your teeth, but then you can eat or do whatever. Don't drink any water. Maybe it's soda. By the way, everything that takes water, the prices on that are going to be jacked up, and the supply chain is going to fail on sodas. The supply chain is going to fail on Gatorade. Now, a lot of these great big beverage companies have already bought out giant aquifers, full well knowing, and they knew 10 years ago that this moment was coming, which is why they bought out these aquifers, because guess what you're going to have to drink when there's no more water that's potable coming out of your sink? Coca-Cola, Gatorade, bottled water at $5 a bottle. I mean, this is going to get crazy if we don't take action now in 2021. Our beverage companies already know this. As I've said, they've already bought these aquifers up. They are waiting to just make bank because potable water just isn't there. And quite frankly, our beverage companies like Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew, all that stuff, Pepsi, Coke, they clean up in rural areas, impoverished areas that do not have safe drinking water access. In the Ozarks, in the South, in the Midwest, those folks are drinking Coke because they can't get clean water to drink. They're bathing in a river, and some of those folks are feeding their babies Coke in a bottle because that's the only nutrient they've got, and it's potable-ish, if you can call Coke potable. Oh, man, I am so glad. My voice is barely hanging in there for the end of this podcast, but I just want to tell you, I don't want to freak anybody out, yet the water wars of 2024 all the way to 2026, this is a thing. And we've got about a 60-40 split on these timelines, meaning 60% of our timelines are leaning towards a water war scenario where the Colorado River is barely a trickle, where the Yellowstone River is a trickle. The city of Billings is, I don't know what we're going to do. Our particular city, we have one reservoir that's full. And if our main water plant or the plant was to fail and they had to use the reservoir water, we would be out of it. We'd be out in the city of Billings in 12 hours. And that would be it. So people would be running up to Rock Creek and all kinds of things. So let's be responsible, gang. I've got angels here telling us that we've got to get, it might be a 40% shot, but if we all make improvements, that's going to turn it to a 50% shot. If we all make improvements after that, it's going to turn it to a 60% shot. We can actually change the future by changing what we're doing today. And you don't want to see this headline. You do not want to see these pictures I'm looking at in the 2024 New York Times of all the dead and bloated and dried up and beef jerkied cattle just sitting there drying up on the range because the ranchers couldn't afford to feed them, nor could they afford to water them, and they wandered off before they could butcher them. The price of beef goes out the window. The price of food is outrageous. So if you can start growing something, even in your backyard, just basic veggies, gang, you can do something hydroponically in your house. You can do that in a little apartment. It's easy. I accidentally grew a tomato plant from a tomato limb that broke off of my tomato plant. And I stuck it in some water hoping it would root, and it did. So I have this accidental hydroponic tomato plant in my window of my kitchen. It's got roots all over. I need to plant it. But just keep in mind, if you do have this device that you can suck water out of the air and get up to 6 gallons of water if you live in a humid area, you can water your hydroponic lettuce and tomatoes and beans and cucumbers. Well, cucumbers are vines, so that's tough. But there's things you can grow that would be good in a smaller environment. And believe me, if they can grow crops of weed indoors with grow lights, you can grow tomatoes. So I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm trying to get us empowered that we can actually change these timelines. It's just going to take our dedication. So let us never see the headline of water wars. May this headline just go away. Right now, it's a huge probability. However, if we get out there now, maybe I'll watch that probability fade and fade and fade until the idea of a water war is just something knocking around in the back of a bad Kevin Costner movie from the 90s, and we don't have to really think about it. Okay, gang? So go be creative. And on Patreon here, underneath of this podcast, go ahead and put your comments about how you'd like to deal with water conservation. And for any of you listening, if you are listening to this at a later time in a syndicated recast, then go ahead at that point and whatever syndicator or distributor you're listening to this podcast on, list your particular method of water conservation. And gang, remember, we had pioneers that came out here that didn't have all the conveniences we had, and they still managed to make it, and so did our indigenous tribes. So our obsession with water usage in America could probably use a little tweak anyway. All right, everybody, a little food for thought. Let us waylay the water wars of 2024. Let us go forward. And now you're probably thirsty. I know I am. Geez, after all that, I'm going to go get a drink of water where there's still some water in the Yellowstone River. And I will see you next podcast.